They say destiny is like a river, silent, unpredictable, and often merciless. For Kofi, a simple farmer in the village of Adum, life had always been about survival, about the earth and the sweat it demanded. But on the day he unearthed the calabash, everything changed. He should have walked away. He should have left it buried. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, and fate has a way of whispering to those who dare to listen. The sun hung low over the village of Adum, its golden rays casting long shadows across the fields. Kofi wiped the sweat from his brow, his muscles aching from the day's labor. The harvest had been unkind this season, and his mother's cough had worsened. There was barely enough to eat, let alone medicine to buy. His hoe struck something hard beneath the soil. He frowned. A rock? He knelt, fingers brushing against something smooth, too smooth to be a stone. He dug deeper, his heart pounding, and there it was. A calabash. But not just any calabash. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. Golden patterns spiraled across its surface, shifting like they were alive. A cold gust of wind rushed through the field, though the air had been still just moments ago. Kofi hesitated. Something about it felt wrong, soft, insistent, curling into his ears like smoke. Speak, and I shall listen. He dropped the calabash, stumbling back. His breath came fast, his skin cold despite the evening heat. He looked around, expecting someone to be lurking in the shadows. But he was alone, completely alone. The calabash sat in the dirt, waiting. That night, as the village slept, Kofi sat in his small hut, the calabash before him. His mother coughed weakly in the next room, her breath ragged. He clenched his fists. He had heard stories of cursed objects, of spirits that tricked men with promises of gold, only to devour their souls in the end. But as another cough tore through the silence, his resolve hardened. Barely a whisper. What if it wasn't food? A trick? The calabash trembled. A low hum filled the hut, the air thick with unseen energy. Then before his eyes, a wooden bowl appeared steaming, filled with rice and smoked fish. Kofi's heart stopped. He reached out with shaking hands. The rice was warm, the fish tender, real. His stomach growled, but he hesitated. Magic had a price. It always did. The calabash sat still, silent, as if waiting. Finally, he took a bite. For the first time in weeks, he ate without worry, without fear. But as he finished the last grain of rice, the whisper returned. You have taken. Will you give? Kofi's stomach twisted. What do you mean? But the calabash said nothing more, and outside, the wind began to howl. Over the next few days, Kofi tested the calabash's power. He asked for more food, for money, for fine clothes, and each time the calabash delivered. The villagers noticed his sudden fortune, whispering among themselves. But Kofi didn't care. His mother's cough faded. His hut each time he took, the calabash would whisper, "Will you give?" He ignored it, until the night his neighbor, old Nana Kwame, came begging. "Kofi," the old man rasped, "my children are starving. Please, just a little food." Kofi hesitated. The calabash could grant anything. It would be easy. But then he remembered the whisper, "Will you give?" And for the first time, something in him hesitated. What would happen if he gave too much? He looked into Nana Kwame's hollow eyes and turned him away. That night, the whispers grew louder. You take, but you do not give. The calabash vibrated, cracks forming along its surface. A chill seeped into the hut, the candlelight flickering wildly. Kofi barely slept, and by morning, Nana Kwame was dead. Panic clawed at Kofi's throat. Was it a coincidence? Or had the calabash? No. He shook the thought away. It was just a bad night, just bad luck. Then 2 more children. Each night, the whispers grew. Each day, the cracks in the calabash deepened. Kofi knew he had made a mistake. He had taken too much, and now, the calabash wanted something in return. But what? Or worse, who? That evening, a storm rolled in, dark clouds swallowing the sky. Kofi sat before the calabash, his hands trembling. "What do you want?" he whispered. This time, the whisper was clear. You. The hut's walls shook. The door slammed open. The wind roared. Kofi stumbled back, his heart hammering. You have taken. Now you must give. A shadow stretched from the calabash, twisting, reaching for him. Kofi screamed. What do you think will happen to Kofi? Subscribe and stay updated for Chapter 2. Let's connect and share in the magic of storytelling. Chapter 2. The Silence After the Storm. The village of Adum awoke to an unsettling stillness. The night before, a violent storm had raged across the land, lightning splitting the sky, the wind howling like an angry spirit. But now the sun shone as if nothing had happened. Birds chirped, children played, life carried on. Except for one thing. Kofi was gone. His hut stood eerily empty, the door swinging slightly in the morning breeze. Inside, everything was in place: his bed, his mother's old wooden stool, even the bowl he had eaten from the night before. But Kofi was nowhere to be found. Except the calabash remained. Sitting in the center of the hut, cracked but still whole, its golden spirals faintly pulsing. Waiting. The villagers whispered among themselves. Some said Kofi had run away in the night, taken by guilt over his sudden wealth. Others murmured of darker things, of spirits, of curses, of debts unpaid. But one thing was certain: the magic calabash was not finished. The stranger in the village. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, a stranger arrived in a flowing black robe, his face hidden beneath a deep hood. His presence sent a chill through the village, though the air was warm. He walked with purpose, his staff tapping against the dry earth. He stopped in front of Kofi's empty hut. The villagers gathered at a safe distance, watching. The stranger turned slowly, his gaze, though unseen, seeming to pierce through every soul in the crowd. Then, in a voice deep and steady, he spoke. "Where is the one who made the wish?" Silence. No one dared answer. He stepped forward, closer to the hut. Then, from beneath his cloak, he pulled out something small, something familiar. A calabash. But unlike Kofi's, this one was completely black, and it was broken. The crowd gasped. "Where is the boy who took what was not his?" The stranger asked again. His voice was calm, yet it carried an unspoken threat. Finally, old Mama Akua, the village elder, stepped forward. Her wrinkled hands trembled as she pointed toward the hut. "He is gone," she whispered. The stranger stood still for a long moment. Then, slowly, he turned his gaze to the hut. "Then the debt remains unpaid." And with that, he entered. The whisper returns. Inside the hut, the air was thick. The stranger knelt before the calabash, tracing a long, gloved finger over its cracked surface. A low hum filled the room, and then a whisper. "Will you give?" The stranger exhaled softly, as if he had been expecting. The calabash trembled. The cracks widened. The whisper grew louder. "Then someone must give in his place." The stranger's lips curled into a grim smile. "So it begins." Far beyond the village, where the land stretched into endless forests, Kofi awoke. His body ached, his head throbbed, his throat was dry as sand. He was lying on the forest floor, beneath a canopy of twisted trees. Strange birds cawed above him, their cries something rotten. He sat up, his mind racing. The last thing he remembered was the calabash cracking open, the shadow reaching for him, the voice whispering his name, and then, nothing. Panic rose in his chest. He had to get back. He had to warn someone. The calabash, a low growl echoed through the trees. Kofi froze. Slowly, he turned his head. Something was watching him. A pair of glowing yellow eyes stared at him from the shadows. Then another. And another. Kofi's blood turned to ice. He was not alone. Back in the village, the stranger emerged from Kofi's hut. The villagers, who had been waiting in fearful silence, took a step back as he spoke. "The boy is lost, but his debt remains." Mama Akua swallowed hard. What must be done?" The stranger extended his hand, revealing the black calabash. "Another must take his place. The balance must be restored." A murmur ran through the crowd. "Someone else?" "Phil." A child whimpered. A mother clutched her son close. Then, a voice rang out. "Take me." Gasps. Heads turned. Ya, Kofi's childhood friend, stepped forward. His jaw was set, his fists clenched. "Kofi was like a brother to me. If he is gone, I will go in his place." Mama Akua's eyes filled with tears. "Ya, no." But he held out the black calabash. "Drink." The villagers held their breath as Ya stepped forward, took the calabash in his hands and lifted it to his lips. The liquid inside was thick and dark, swirling like ink. He hesitated. Then, he drank. And as soon as he did, the world around him began to shift. Cliffhanger. The curse lives on in the forest. Kofi ran. The glowing eyes followed. He could hear them now, snarling, whispering, calling his name. "You took. You did not give." He stumbled, falling into a clearing, and there, standing in the center, but it was not the stranger from the village, yellow as the creatures in the trees. And when he spoke, his voice was no longer his own. "You took, Kofi. Now I have come to take from you." The trees trembled, the ground cracked. The calabash in Ya's hands pulsed with dark energy. Kofi's scream echoed through the forest. And then, darkness. The mystery deepens, the curse grows stronger, and Kofi is now trapped in a terrifying fate of his own making. Let me know in the comments section where you're watching from. Kofi's heart pounded as the ground beneath him cracked and shifted. tendrils of shadow slithering from the depths. Ya stood before him, eyes glowing like burning embers, the black calabash in his hands pulsating with dark energy. "You took," Ya's voice echoed unnaturally, blending with the whispers around them. "Now, you must give." Kofi stumbled back. "Ya, please. This isn't you." But Ya wasn't listening. His fingers tightened around the calabash, and suddenly the shadows lunged. Kofi barely dodged as black tendrils erupted from the earth, wrapping around trees and twisting toward him. He scrambled to his feet and ran, branches whipping against his skin as he tore through the forest. The whispers followed. "You took, you did not give. The debt remains unpaid." Kofi's mind raced. The calabash had given him riches, power, but at what cost? Had he doomed himself? His village? Then he heard it. A voice, different from the whispers. "The calabash must be returned." Kofi skidded to a halt, panting. He turned in the direction of the voice. There, standing beneath a twisted tree, was an old woman cloaked in tattered robes. Her eyes gleamed with wisdom and warning. "Who are you?" Kofi gasped. "The keeper," she said simply. "You have taken what was never meant to be yours. Now the forest demands balance." Kofi swallowed hard. "How do I fix this?" The keeper's gaze shifted behind him. Kofi turned, and his blood ran cold. Ya was there, only it wasn't truly Ya anymore. His face was hollow, his expression vacant, his skin pale as if the life had been drained from him. The black calabash trembled in his hands. "You took." His voice was barely human now. "You must give." Kofi's breath caught. He understood now. The calabash didn't just grant power, it demanded something in return. And Ya had unknowingly taken Kofi's place as its next victim. But Kofi wouldn't let that happen. Kofi turned to the keeper. "Tell me what the calabash." "Break it." Kofi's heart pounded. Break the calabash? It had given him everything. But it had also taken so much. He turned to Ya, his best friend, the boy who had unknowingly offered himself as payment. If Kofi didn't act, the forest would consume Ya forever. With a deep breath, Kofi lunged. Ya shrieked as Kofi grabbed the black calabash. The moment Kofi's hands touched it, searing pain shot through his veins, as if fire and ice coursed through his blood. The shadows around them writhed and screamed. "You cannot break what is owed," the whispers howled. Kofi gritted his teeth. "Watch me." With every ounce of strength he had left, he raised the calabash and smashed it against the earth. A deafening boom shook the forest. The ground trembled, the trees groaned. The shadows let out a piercing scream before shattering into nothingness. Ya collapsed. The glow in his eyes faded, and the calabash was no more. When Kofi opened his eyes, the forest was silent. The unnatural darkness was gone. The trees no longer whispered. The air felt lighter, as if the very land had sighed in relief. Ya stirred beside him, his face no longer haunted, his breath steady. The keeper stepped forward, nodding approvingly. "The debt is paid." Kofi swallowed hard. "It's over?" The keeper's gaze lingered on him. "For now." She turned, vanishing into the mist, leaving Kofi and Ya alone beneath the quiet sky. As they made their way back to the village, Kofi knew one thing for certain. Some magic was never meant to be used, and some prices were too high to pay.